My golden boy brother called me a failure and said nobody wanted to listen to me at the holiday feast I prepared. So I told him to handle everything himself while cutting off his access to all bank cards. Now he's begging for mercy. Sup Reddit, my name is Tyler, and I'm 29 years old. Last Thanksgiving, I hosted a family dinner and invited everyone I cared about. Not a single person showed up. They all figured I wasn't worth the drive, apparently. So I decided to freeze every payment I'd been making for them, cut every account they had access to, and filed all the necessary paperwork with the IRS. A few days later, the panic calls started rolling in. Grab some popcorn because this story gets really good. I'm a 29-year-old guy who runs an electrical contracting company here in Las Vegas. I started the business about 6 years ago after getting laid off from some soul-crushing corporate job that was slowly killing my spirit. Looking back, getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to take a risk I'd been too scared to take on my own. Turns out I'm pretty good at the technical side of electrical work, but I'm even better at running the business itself. We handle everything from residential installations to commercial maintenance contracts and emergency repairs. Getting my electrical license and learning the trade properly was one of the smartest investments I ever made. Over the years, I've built up a solid crew of 5 guys who actually know what they're doing and take pride in their work. Living in Vegas has its advantages for this kind of business. The intense heat means air conditioning units and electrical systems are working overtime year-round, which translates to steady money coming in. There's always someone who needs emergency repairs or wants to upgrade their electrical panel. The work is consistent, and I've built a reputation for quality service at fair prices. I've got this amazing girlfriend named Christina who I've been with for about 3 years now. She's a marketing director at a tech startup and makes good money on her own. She drives a nice car and doesn't need me to fund her lifestyle, which is refreshing. She's a total keeper in every sense of the word. Plus, she actually gets along with my dog Max, which is honestly more than I can say for most of my family members. Max is this massive German Shepherd mix I rescued about 4 years ago. The dog is built like a tank, but has the brain of a golden retriever puppy. He's constantly doing the dumbest stuff you can imagine. I'll find him trying to catch his own tail for 30 minutes straight, completely focused like it's the most important mission in the world. Last week, I caught him with his head stuck in the garbage can, tail wagging like he'd discovered buried treasure. Just last week, I was working on my truck in the garage and found him carrying around a screwdriver in his mouth like he understood what it was for and wanted to help with the repairs. Christina says Max has big himbo energy, which honestly describes both of us perfectly. The dog weighs 90 pounds but still thinks he's a lapdog and will try to climb onto the couch with you whether there's room or not. He's the kind of dog who would probably try to befriend a burglar and show them where I keep the good treats. My family situation started getting complicated about 4 years ago, right around the time everyone suddenly realized I had money. It's funny how that works. When you're struggling, nobody pays attention to you. But the moment you start doing well, suddenly, everyone needs help with something. My parents live about an hour north of me in some retirement community that they honestly couldn't actually afford on their own. My older brother Brandon is 33 and has been between opportunities for most of his adult life, which is basically code for chronically unemployed but too proud to admit it. He's got this attitude where he acts like he's just temporarily down on his luck. But the truth is, he's never held a steady job for more than 6 months. My younger sister Jessica is 26 and has this entitled mindset where she thinks the world owes her everything because she's pretty and went to college. She's one of those people who expects life to hand her success on a silver platter without having to work for it. It all started small, the way these things usually do. Dad needed new tires for his car, $800. Mom's credit card somehow got maxed out, and she needed help with a $1,300 payment. Brandon was always having some kind of crisis with his apartment, his car, or his latest get-rich-quick scheme that never seemed to pan out. Jessica was in graduate school, studying something completely useless like art therapy, and she constantly forgot to budget properly for textbooks or rent payments. I didn't mind helping at first because that's what family is supposed to do, right? Plus, they never made it sound like a big deal. It was always presented as just quick fixes here and there, temporary assistance until they got back on their feet. I genuinely thought I was being a good son and brother by stepping up when they needed help. Looking back, I should have seen the pattern forming, but at the time it just seemed like normal family support. Then everything changed 4 years ago when Dad had his massive heart attack. The medical bills were astronomical, and he couldn't work for months while he recovered. Mom was absolutely freaking out about the possibility of losing their house, and the whole family was in crisis mode. I quietly started covering their mortgage payments without making a big announcement about it. I just made sure their payment went through every month, about $2,400, because they'd refinanced their house twice over the years to pull out equity for God knows what. Around the same time, Brandon was getting evicted from his apartment because, shocker, he hadn't paid rent in 4 months. He came to me all stressed out and desperate, saying he just needed help with a security deposit on a new place so he could get back on his feet. Long story short, I ended up co-signing on a lease for him. When he inevitably couldn't make those payments either, I started covering his rent too, just to keep him from being homeless. Jessica was having her own money problems in graduate school around this time. She lost her part-time job and couldn't afford tuition anymore. The usual story with her. So I set up what was basically a monthly allowance for her through an education account I'd established through my electrical company. $1,900 a month to cover her school expenses and living costs. I figured I was investing in her future and helping her get the education she needed to support herself. Here's the thing that really gets me though. The more I helped them, the more demanding they became. At first, there were genuine thank yous and promises to pay me back when they got on their feet. But after a while, my financial support just became expected, like it was something I owed them. Mom would text me things like, "Water heater died, need $900," like she was ordering pizza. Brandon would hit me up for his car insurance payments without even saying please. Jessica would send me Venmo requests for random stuff like nail appointments and new clothes, as if I was her personal bank account. The weirdest part of all this was that they seemed to want me around less and less, even as they needed my money more and more. I started getting left out of family group chats and wouldn't hear about family dinners until after they'd already happened. When I'd ask about it, I'd get responses like, "Oh, we didn't think you'd want to come," or "You're always so busy with work." But the money requests kept coming like clockwork every month, just like paying bills. It was like I'd become this automated payment system rather than an actual family member. Christina noticed the pattern before I did, which probably says something about how deep I was in this mess. We'd be hanging out at my place, having a normal evening together, and my phone would buzz with another emergency text from someone in my family. I'd just automatically open my banking app and transfer money without even thinking about it, like it was some kind of reflex I'd developed over the years. She finally said something about 8 months ago that really opened my eyes. "Babe, do you realize you just sent your brother $600 for the 3rd time this month?" I looked at my banking app with fresh eyes, and holy shit, she was right. I was basically funding 3 separate households and somehow hadn't noticed how bad it had gotten. The numbers were staggering when I actually paid attention to them. I tried to rationalize it to her, saying, "They're family, Christina. This is just temporary until they get back on their feet." But even as I said it, I knew how weak it sounded. Christina gave me this look like she wanted to say something important, but decided against it at the last moment. I should have listened to that look and pressed her to tell me what she was really thinking, because she clearly saw something I was still blind to. So Christmas was coming up, and for once I wanted to do something nice for the family that might actually bring us all back together. We never really got together anymore as a unit, unless someone needed money for something. I thought maybe hosting a proper holiday dinner could remind everyone what being a family was supposed to feel like. I decided to go all out and make it really special for everyone. I rented this incredible Airbnb up in Flagstaff with a huge dining room and an amazing view of the mountains. The place cost me about $900 for the weekend, but I figured it was worth it if it meant having quality time with my family. I planned a whole traditional Christmas spread ham, stuffing, all the classic sides, the works. I even hired a local chef to help with the cooking because I wasn't trying to spend Christmas Day sweating over a hot stove when I could be hanging out with the people I loved. Christina was genuinely excited about the whole thing. She'd never had the chance to properly meet my family before, and she was looking forward to finally getting to know them and understanding where I came from. Max was coming along too since the place was pet-friendly, and he absolutely loves car rides. I could already picture him running around in the snow, probably trying to eat snowflakes and generally being his adorable, ridiculous self. I sent everyone the details about 3 weeks ahead of time in a nice group text with photos of the beautiful house, the exact address, detailed driving directions, and everything they'd need to know. I made it clear how excited I was. Can't wait to see you all. This is going to be an amazing Christmas. Just bring yourselves. I've got everything covered. I wanted them to know that all they had to do was show up and enjoy themselves. The responses I got back were lukewarm at best, which should have been my first warning sign. Mom texted back, "Sounds nice, we'll try to make it," which wasn't exactly the enthusiasm I'd been hoping for. Dad didn't respond at all, which was typical for him. Brandon sent back, "Sure, whatever," like I'd invited him to watch paint dry. Jessica replied with, "Ugh, Flagstaff is so far. Why couldn't you just rent somewhere closer?" But I figured they'd show up anyway because, it's Christmas. Who says no to a free vacation rental, free food, and free everything? Christina and I drove up to Flagstaff on Saturday morning with Max sprawled across the back seat, his tongue hanging out the window like the happy goofball he is. We got to the house around 1 p.m. and spent the afternoon prepping food and setting everything up perfectly. The place was even more beautiful than the photos had suggested, with this huge farmhouse table that could easily seat 10 people comfortably. The chef arrived at 4 p.m. to start working on the ham, and everything was coming together perfectly. Dinner was scheduled for 7 p.m., and I had the table set for 9 people, me, Christina, my parents, Brandon, Jessica, and a couple of extra spots in case anyone wanted to bring a +1. I was genuinely excited about bringing everyone together for what I hoped would be a memorable Christmas celebration. 7 o'clock came and went with no sign of my family. By 7:30, still nobody had shown up, and I was starting to get that sick feeling in the pit of my stomach that something was seriously wrong. At 8 p.m., I was standing there staring at this perfectly set table, and I couldn't shake the growing realization that they weren't coming. But I kept telling myself that maybe they'd hit traffic or stopped somewhere along the way. Anything to avoid facing the truth that was becoming increasingly obvious. Then the texts started rolling in, one after another, each one feeling like a punch to the gut. Mom texted first, "Sorry, honey, your father isn't feeling well. Maybe next year." Brandon followed with, "Car broke down, can't make it. Save me some leftovers, LOL." The LOL at the end felt particularly cruel, like this was all just some kind of joke to him. Jessica's message was the worst of all. At Brad's family dinner instead, his parents actually put effort into Christmas. Maybe plan better next time. Dad never even bothered to respond at all, which somehow hurt more than the excuses everyone else had sent. At least the others had acknowledged that I existed, and that there was supposed to be a dinner happening. I'm standing there in this beautiful house, looking at a table set for 9 people with a perfect ham getting cold and enough side dishes to feed an army. The chef was giving me these sympathetic looks like he'd seen this kind of family drama before. Christina was visibly pissed, but trying to hide it for my sake, which made me feel even worse about dragging her into this mess. Max was just happy, because he could sense that ham scraps were definitely coming his way, blissfully unaware of the human drama unfolding around him. The worst part came later that night when I made the mistake of checking social media. Jessica had posted Instagram stories from some basic Christmas dinner at her boyfriend's house, clearly having a great time with his family. Brandon was at a sports bar watching football with his buddies, based on his posts. My parents were home the whole time. Mom had posted a Facebook photo of them watching TV with the caption, "Quiet Christmas at home." They weren't sick, they didn't have car trouble, they didn't have any real emergencies. They just didn't think I was worth the 3-hour drive to spend Christmas with me. Christina was absolutely incredible about the whole situation. She helped me pack up all the extra food for the chef to take home to his own family, opened a bottle of the expensive wine I'd been saving for the occasion, and we ended up having this quiet, intimate dinner together. Max got more ham than any dog has a right to eat in one sitting, and he was living his absolute best life. Honestly, looking back, it was better than any chaotic family dinner I'd had in years. But I was done with my family's bullshit. Sitting there looking at all those empty chairs, the reality finally hit me like a freight train. They'd never seen me as family. They saw me as a resource, a walking ATM machine that they could access whenever they needed money. That night, Christina and I were sitting by the fireplace, and she finally said what she'd been thinking for months. "Tyler, they're using you. You know that, right?" I nodded because I'd known it for a while deep down, but I hadn't wanted to admit it to myself. It's a hard thing to accept about the people you're supposed to love unconditionally. "What are you going to do about it?" she asked, getting straight to the heart of the matter. I looked over at Max, who was passed out on the couch with his belly full of ham, living his best life without a care in the world. Sometimes I genuinely envied that dog and his ability to just exist in the moment without worrying about complicated family dynamics or financial obligations. "I'm going to end this," I told her, and I meant every word of it. That weekend, I did something I'd never done before in my life. I sat down and actually calculated how much money I'd been giving my family over the past 4 years. I opened up spreadsheets, pulled bank statements, went through Venmo history, everything. Christina helped me because she's way better with numbers and financial analysis than I am, and she could look at it objectively without the emotional baggage I was carrying. The total was absolutely insane when we finally added everything up. Over the course of 4 years, I'd given them close to $200,000, not loaned, given. Because none of them had ever paid back a single dollar of anything I'd helped them with. The number was so staggering that I had to double-check our calculations multiple times before I could believe it was real. Breaking it down made it even more shocking. My parents' mortgage payments alone came to $2,400 a month for 3 years straight, which totaled $86,000. That was just their house payment. It didn't include all the other random expenses I'd covered for them over the years. Brandon's rent and his various emergencies averaged about $1,500 a month, so that was roughly $72,000 down the drain. Jessica's graduate school fund had been $1,900 a month for 2.5 years, adding up to $57,000 for her useless art therapy degree. Then there were all the random expenses on top of that: car repairs, medical bills, credit card payments, security deposits, you name it. I was essentially running a private charity for people who couldn't be bothered to drive 3 hours to spend Christmas dinner with me. But here's where my obsessive record-keeping habits from running an electrical business actually paid off in a big way. When you run a contracting company, you learn real quick to document absolutely everything: customer complaints, warranty work, payment schedules, change orders. If it's not written down with dates and details, it didn't happen. That habit has saved my ass more than once when customers tried to claim work wasn't done properly or tried to get out of paying their bills. Naturally, I'd been keeping the same detailed records for all the family money transactions over the years. I had dates, amounts, purposes for every payment, and even screenshots of text conversations where they'd ask me for money. It was all documented like a proper business relationship, which turned out to be incredibly important later on. The legal situation was even more interesting than I'd initially realized. When Dad had his heart attack 4 years ago, they'd given me power of attorney to handle their financial affairs while he was in the hospital recovering. The thing is, they never bothered to revoke it after he got better. So technically, I still had legal control over their accounts and could make financial decisions on their behalf. Brandon's apartment lease had me listed as a co-signer, which meant I could terminate my responsibility with proper notice to the landlord. Jessica's graduate school payments were going through an education account I'd set up through my electrical business for tax purposes, so I had complete control over that funding. I'd been quietly managing their finances for years without really thinking about the legal implications. Now it was time to stop managing and start controlling the situation. Monday morning, I opened my laptop and started making systematic changes to everything. First, I canceled all automatic payments to my parents, not just the mortgage, but everything that was coming out of my accounts. Their car insurance, cell phone bills, credit card payments, all of it. If it was being funded by me, it stopped immediately. Then I sent Brandon's landlord a formal 30-day notice that I was terminating my responsibility as co-signer on the lease. Legally, this meant Brandon would need to qualify for the lease on his own income, which he obviously couldn't do, or find a new place to live within a month. Jessica's education account got frozen immediately with one phone call to my accountant. Her tuition payments and living allowance were locked down tight, and she'd have no access to any of it. But I wasn't done yet, because if you're going to cut people off financially, you might as well be thorough about it. I removed them from every family plan and subscription service they'd been using through my accounts. Netflix, Spotify, Amazon Prime, my Costco membership, even the family cell phone plan. If they wanted these services, they could pay for them themselves like adults. Then I changed all my passwords and enabled two-factor authentication on everything, because I had a strong feeling things were about to get very messy, and I didn't want them trying to hack into my accounts to fix their problems themselves. I also sent my crew a heads up that some angry family members might show up at job sites looking for me over the next few weeks. My lead guy, Roberto, just laughed and said, "Boss, we got your back. Anyone gives you trouble, they deal with us first." Having a crew of tough electricians who have your back is definitely reassuring when you're expecting family drama. By Tuesday morning, the calls started coming in exactly as I'd expected they would. Mom called first, and I could hear the panic in her voice even through the voicemail she left. "Tyler, something's wrong with our mortgage payment. The bank says it was declined. Can you call me back as soon as possible?" The urgency in her tone told me she was starting to realize that something fundamental had changed. Brandon called about an hour later, and his message was more confused than panicked at first. "Dude, what's going on? My phone got shut off this morning, and my landlord just called saying something about the lease. Call me back when you get this." I could hear genuine bewilderment in his voice, like he couldn't comprehend that his free ride might actually be ending. Jessica left a voicemail that was basically just her shrieking incoherently about her tuition payment failing, and how I was apparently ruining her education and her entire future. She was always the most dramatic one in the family, so her reaction was pretty much what I'd expected. Dad finally called that evening, and his message had this authoritative tone like he was still trying to be the family patriarch giving orders. "Tyler, your mother is hysterical. Whatever game you're playing here, just fix it. We need to talk." Game. That's what they thought this was. Some kind of power play or manipulation tactic, rather than the natural consequence of their own actions. I listened to all their increasingly desperate messages without responding to a single one. For the first time in years, I wasn't dropping everything to solve their problems the moment they called. I wasn't rushing to transfer money or make phone calls to fix whatever crisis they created for themselves. And honestly, it felt absolutely amazing to have that weight lifted off my shoulders. Christina came over that night with Thai takeout, and Max immediately tackled her for belly rubs the moment she walked through the door. We sat on the couch eating pad thai and green curry, while my phone continued buzzing with increasingly frantic messages that I completely ignored. "You know they're going to try guilt trips next," Christina said, while scratching behind Max's ears. "Let them try," I replied. "I'm done feeling guilty for not wanting to be treated like garbage by my own family." She leaned over and kissed my cheek. "I'm proud of you for finally standing up for yourself," she said, and I realized that her approval meant more to me than anything my family could say at this point. That night I slept better than I had in months. There was no stress about who was going to need money next, no anxiety about the next family crisis that would require my immediate financial intervention. Just pure, peaceful silence. Christina stayed over, and we ordered Chinese takeout and watched Netflix. Max spent the evening doing his favorite thing, trying to steal spring rolls when he thought we weren't looking. The dog has absolutely zero stealth skills, but maximum confidence in his sneakiness, which pretty much sums up his entire approach to life. For the first time in years, my phone wasn't constantly buzzing with financial emergencies every few hours. No urgent texts about broken appliances or overdue bills that needed my immediate attention. Just normal stuff like work schedules and Christina sending me funny memes she'd found online. It was weird how quiet and peaceful my life felt without constantly managing other people's self-created disasters. The next few days were like watching a masterclass in entitled behavior unfold in real time. My family went through all the classic stages of grief, but instead of reaching acceptance at the end, they just got stuck on anger and decided to make it my problem to deal with. Brandon was the first to completely lose his shit and show his true colors. He left me a voicemail Wednesday night that was basically 12 straight minutes of him screaming at the top of his lungs about how I was a selfish piece of garbage and how family is supposed to stick together through thick and thin. The best part was when he called me ungrateful for all the support they'd supposedly given me over the years. What support exactly? I was genuinely curious what imaginary help he thought they'd provided, considering I was the one who'd been paying for everything. Thursday morning, he escalated the situation by actually showing up at my office building. My receptionist called my extension to tell me that some angry guy was in the lobby demanding to see me immediately. When I looked out my office window, there was Brandon pacing around the waiting area like a caged animal, gesticulating wildly and clearly agitated. I told my receptionist to call building security and have him removed from the premises. He stood outside in the parking lot for about an hour after that, probably hoping I'd come out and talk to him so he could guilt me into fixing everything. Instead, I ordered lunch delivery and watched him through my office window like he was free entertainment. The guy finally gave up and left when it started raining. Honestly, Max would have had more patience and persistence than Brandon showed that day. My parents took a completely different approach to the situation. They went full guilt trip mode, which was honestly more predictable than Brandon's explosive anger. Mom started calling twice a day, leaving these incredibly weepy voicemails about how disappointed she was in me and how I was abandoning my family when they needed me most. She kept saying things like, "We raised you better than this," and "Your father's health is getting worse because of the stress you're causing him." The stress I was causing. That was rich, coming from people who couldn't be bothered to show up for a Christmas dinner I'd planned and paid for. According to my mother's twisted logic, I was the one creating problems by not continuing to fund their lifestyle indefinitely. Dad's strategy was to try the tough guy routine that had probably worked when I was a kid, but felt pathetic now. He left me a message saying I had exactly 48 hours to fix this mess, or there would be serious consequences. What consequences, exactly? Was he going to take away my allowance? The man couldn't afford his own mortgage payments without my help, but he was trying to threaten me like he still had some kind of authority over my life. But Jessica? Man, Jessica went completely nuclear in a way that surprised even me. She showed up at my house on Saturday morning, banging on the front door and screaming so loudly that my neighbors came out of their houses to see what was happening. Christina was there for the weekend, and Max was going absolutely crazy, barking at all the commotion and trying to figure out what threat he needed to protect us from. When I finally opened the door, Jessica immediately launched into this tirade about how I was destroying her future and how dare I sabotage her education over some stupid Christmas dinner that didn't even matter. It wasn't about the dinner, I told her calmly. It was about basic respect and treating me like I actually matter to this family. Respect? You want respect? She shot back. Here's some respect for you. You're a pathetic loser who has to buy people's love because you have no personality. The only reason anyone tolerates you is because you pay for everything. Without your money, you're absolutely nothing. Christina stepped up behind me at that point. I think you should leave now, she said firmly. But Jessica turned on her immediately like a rabid animal. Oh great, the gold digger speaks up, Jessica sneered. How much is he paying you to pretend to like him? Or are you just waiting for him to propose so you can take half his money in the divorce? That's when Max decided he'd heard enough of this nonsense. He's usually the friendliest dog in the world, but something about Jessica's tone and aggressive body language set him off. He stepped between us and let out this low, menacing growl that sounded like a diesel engine starting up. All 90 pounds of him was just radiating this energy of, back off right now or find out what these teeth can do. Jessica actually took a step backwards, which showed she had at least some survival instincts. Get that stupid mutt away from me, she demanded. His name is Max, and he's a better judge of character than I am, I replied. You need to leave my property right now. She finally left, but not before kicking over my trash can and screaming something about how I'd regret this for the rest of my pathetic life. Christina and I watched her peel out of my driveway like she was auditioning for a Fast and Furious movie. Max wagged his tail proudly, clearly pleased with himself for defending his pack from the crazy lady. Your sister seems nice, Christina said dryly once Jessica was gone. That wasn't even her final form, I replied. And unfortunately, I was absolutely right about that. By Sunday, Jessica had started a full social media campaign against me. She posted this long, dramatic Facebook rant about toxic family members who abandon you when you need help most, and how some people let money go to their heads and forget where they came from. Brandon shared it immediately with his own comment about how blood is supposed to be thicker than water unless you're a selfish prick who turns his back on his own family. Mom shared it too, adding some passive-aggressive caption about loving your children even when they break your heart. They were trying to paint me as the villain in this story, the ungrateful son who turned his back on his struggling family. They figured I wouldn't fight back publicly because I'd never done it before, and they thought they could control the narrative. They figured wrong. By Monday, their social media sob story was gaining serious traction and attention from people who didn't know the full story. Old family friends were commenting with sympathy for my struggling family members. Distant relatives were sharing Jessica's post and adding their own commentary about how disappointing it was to see me abandon my loved ones. I was starting to look like a real piece of shit to anyone who only heard their version of events. Christina found me at my kitchen table Tuesday morning, staring at my laptop screen and getting more pissed off by the minute as I scrolled through the comments. They're really going all out on this victim narrative, she said, reading over my shoulder at the increasingly harsh comments about my character. Look at this comment from my Aunt Linda, I said, pointing at the screen. I can't believe Tyler would abandon his family like this. They raised him better than that. This was coming from Linda, who hadn't spoken to me in 4 years unless she needed money for whatever MLM scheme she was involved in that month. Max patted over and put his massive head on my lap, sensing that I was stressed about something. That dog has better emotional intelligence than my entire family combined. You know what pisses me off the most? I said, scratching behind his ears while he looked up at me with those understanding brown eyes. They're acting like I just disappeared one day without any explanation, like they have no idea why I'm upset with them. So tell them, Christina said simply. What? Tell everyone. Post the receipts, all of them. Christina was absolutely right. I'd been taking the high road for years, staying quiet and keeping family business private while they ran their mouths and controlled the narrative. It was time to change tactics and let people see what had really been happening. I spent that entire afternoon putting together a social media post that was basically a comprehensive financial audit of my relationship with my family over the past 4 years. I included screenshots of Venmo payments, bank transfers, lease agreements, everything I could legally share without violating any privacy laws. I didn't include exact dollar amounts because I'm not completely vindictive, but I made it crystal clear how much money had been flowing in one direction for years. Then I posted the photos from the Christmas house in Flagstaff that I'd been saving on my phone. The beautiful table set for 9 people, the massive spread of food that nobody came to eat, the empty chairs where my family was supposed to be sitting. The caption was simple and to the point. When you spend $2,300 on Christmas dinner for your family and they all bail without warning, this is what you get. This is also what $200,000 of family support over 4 years gets you. An empty table and a bunch of social media posts about how you're supposedly the bad guy for finally standing up for yourself. The response was immediate and absolutely overwhelming. Friends started commenting within minutes, and their reactions were exactly what I'd hoped for. Wait, you paid for everything and they still didn't show up? That's ice cold. $200,000 over 4 years, dude? You were basically their parent. They're really posting about being abandoned when they're the ones who abandoned you at Christmas? The audacity is unreal. My high school buddy Jake summed it up perfectly in a comment that got dozens of likes. Some people mistake kindness for weakness until the ATM stops working. Within just a few hours, the entire narrative had completely flipped. People were sharing my post and adding their own stories about toxic family members who'd taken advantage of them. The comment section became this cathartic space where people were absolutely roasting my family for their entitled behavior and hypocrisy. Brandon made the catastrophic mistake of trying to defend himself in the comments, which only made things worse for him. He started arguing with my friends about how I supposedly owed the family support because they had raised me and supported me growing up. My buddy Luis shut that down immediately. Bro, that's called being a parent. You don't get to charge interest on raising your own kid. Jessica completely panicked and deleted her original post after it started getting flooded with comments calling her out for being a hypocrite and a user. Mom disabled comments on her post entirely when people started asking pointed questions about why she couldn't afford her own mortgage. But the best part came Wednesday evening when I got a phone call from my cousin Ryan, who I'd always liked but rarely talked to. He'd been watching this entire social media mess unfold, and he wanted to give me his perspective on the situation. Tyler, I've been watching this dysfunction play out for years, he said. Your family has been bleeding you dry, and honestly, everyone in the extended family knows it. I should have said something sooner. Why didn't you? I asked. Because it wasn't really my business, and honestly, I figured you knew what you were doing and had it under control. But after seeing how they treated you at Christmas, man, that's just cold. You deserve so much better than that. That conversation meant more to me than I'd expected. For the first time, I felt like someone in my family actually understood what had been happening and validated my feelings about the whole situation. Thursday morning brought the first real consequence of my social media truth bomb that went beyond just online drama. Brandon's landlord called me directly, and what he told me was absolutely priceless. Apparently, Brandon had been telling him that I would continue covering the rent payments even after the cosigner termination notice I'd filed. He'd been lying through his teeth, essentially promising money that wasn't coming. When the landlord saw my Facebook post with all the financial details, he realized that Brandon had been completely bullshitting him about the arrangement. Mr. Tyler, I need to inform you that your brother has been evicted effective immediately, he said. He has exactly 72 hours to vacate the premises, and frankly, I should have done this months ago. I should have felt bad about Brandon losing his apartment, but honestly, I felt absolutely nothing. Brandon had made his choice when he decided that my Christmas invitation wasn't worth a 3-hour drive. Now he was dealing with the natural consequences of that decision. But I wasn't done with the consequences yet, not even close. By Friday, the social media fallout had reached nuclear levels. My original post had been shared over 300 times, and every single share brought more comments dragging my family through the mud for their entitled behavior and blatant hypocrisy. But here's where things got really interesting, and this is the part where my obsessive record-keeping habits really paid off in ways I hadn't even anticipated. Remember how I mentioned that I kept detailed records of everything because of my electrical business? Well, I'd also been very careful about the legal aspects of all that family support I'd been providing. When you're dealing with that kind of money over multiple years, the law gets involved whether you want it to or not. My lawyer Peter called me Friday afternoon after I'd forwarded him some of the increasingly nasty and threatening voicemails that Brandon had been leaving on my phone. Some of them included threats about making me pay for destroying the family, which was starting to sound like harassment. "Tyler, I've been looking at your situation from a legal standpoint," Peter said, "and there are some things we need to discuss urgently. Your brother's threats could potentially be considered harassment, but more importantly, there are some serious tax implications to all the money you've been giving them over the years." "What kind of tax implications?" I asked, though I was starting to get an idea of where this conversation was heading. "Well, you've essentially been providing substantial income to 3 different households without proper documentation or tax reporting," he explained. "The IRS could view this as unreported gifts, which creates liability for both you and your family members." I'd never thought about that particular angle before, but it made perfect sense once he explained it. Turns out that when you give someone more than $16,000 in a single year, there are specific forms that need to be filed with the IRS. I'd been doing everything informally for years, which meant my family had been receiving what the government technically considered taxable income without reporting any of it on their tax returns. "What are my options here?" I asked, already knowing I was going to like his answer. "We can file amended tax returns documenting all the payments as loans rather than gifts," Peter said. "That would require your family members to either pay the money back to you or report it as forgiven debt income on their tax returns. Either way, they're going to owe substantial back taxes on approximately $200,000 of unreported income." The idea was absolutely beautiful in its elegant simplicity. I could legally cover my own ass with the IRS while simultaneously dropping a massive tax bomb on the people who'd been treating me like garbage for years. "Do it," I told him without hesitation. Peter got to work immediately, and by Monday morning he'd filed all the necessary paperwork with the IRS. Every single payment I'd made over the past 4 years was now officially documented as a loan with 0% interest. Suddenly, my family owed me $200,000 in legal debt. Plus, they owed the government substantial back taxes on the income they'd failed to report. The official IRS letters went out on Tuesday. Each of my family members received formal correspondence informing them of their new tax liability and demanding immediate payment of back taxes plus penalties and interest. The government doesn't mess around when it comes to unreported income, and the penalties can be absolutely brutal. Brandon called me 52 times that day. 52 actual phone calls. I let every single one go straight to voicemail, and listening to them later was like watching someone's entire world collapse in real time. The messages started angry and defiant, then gradually shifted to panic and desperation as he realized the full scope of what was happening to him. "You can't do this to me," he said in the first few messages. "This is completely insane. You're destroying us over nothing." But by the end of the day, his tone had completely changed. "Tyler, please, I'm begging you. This tax thing is going to ruin my life. I can't afford this. We need to work something out." Actually, I wasn't destroying anything. I was simply asking for what they owed me, both financially and legally. Wednesday brought the first crack in their previously unified front of anger and defiance. Jessica called me, and for the first time in months, she wasn't screaming at the top of her lungs. Her voice was small and desperate in a way I'd never heard before. "Tyler, please, we need to talk," she said, and I could hear the genuine panic underneath her words. "This tax thing is going to completely ruin me. I can't afford this kind of money." "You should have thought about that before calling me a pathetic loser who buys people's love," I replied calmly. "I was upset, okay? I didn't mean any of those things I said," she backtracked frantically. "Yes, you did," I said. "You meant every single word, and so did everyone else. You all showed me exactly what you really think of me." Thursday brought my parents' turn to finally break down and face reality. Mom called me crying harder than I'd heard since Dad's heart attack, begging me to make this whole situation right and saying they were going to lose their house if they had to pay these taxes. "We're family, Tyler. Family is supposed to forgive each other," she sobbed into the phone. "Family is also supposed to show up for each other," I replied. "And family doesn't treat each other like human ATM machines." "It was just one dinner," she said, still not getting it. "It was never about the dinner, Mom. It was about respect, and you've never respected me as anything more than a source of money." Friday afternoon, Christina came over and found me on the couch with Max, going through the increasingly desperate voicemails my family had been leaving throughout the week. The messages were getting more and more panicked as the reality of their situation sank in. "How are you feeling about all this?" Christina asked, settling in next to us on the couch. "Honestly, free," I said, and I meant it completely. For the first time in years, I feel completely free from all their drama and financial emergencies. She smiled and kissed my cheek. "Good. You deserve to feel free from all that toxic nonsense." That night, we ordered pizza and watched Netflix while Max hogged most of the couch like the spoiled dog he is. My phone was still blowing up with calls and texts from my family, but I ignored all of them. This was my life now. Peaceful evenings with people who actually wanted to be around me for who I was, not what I could do for them financially. Sunday evening, I got a text from Brandon that was different from all the angry, threatening ones he'd been sending. This one just said, "Please call me. We need to figure this out." For the first time in 2 weeks, I actually called him back, mostly out of curiosity to see how desperate he'd become. "Tyler, thank God," he said, answering on the first ring. "Look, we screwed up, okay? All of us. We should have come to Christmas. We should have appreciated everything you've done for us over the years." "You're only saying that because you owe the IRS money now," I pointed out. "That's not true," he protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "We've been talking as a family and we realize we took you for granted. We want to make this right somehow." "How exactly do you plan to make it right?" I asked. There was a long pause. "We don't know yet, but there has to be something we can work out. Some kind of arrangement. There was something they could do, but they weren't going to like it at all." I let Brandon sweat it out for 4 full days before I called him back. During that time, the IRS letters had been delivered to everyone, and apparently the reality of owing back taxes on $200,000 of unreported income was really starting to sink in. When I finally called Brandon on Thursday evening, he answered before the first ring was even finished. "Tyler, please, we need to meet, all of us," he said immediately. "We can work this out. I know we can." "Meet where?" I asked. "Anywhere you want. Your office, a restaurant, whatever works for you. Just please, we need to talk face to face." I thought about it for a moment. Christina was planning to spend the night, and we were going to order Chinese food and have a quiet evening with Max. But I was genuinely curious to see just how desperate they'd gotten. "Saturday, 3 p.m., I said finally. "That coffee shop on Main Street downtown." "All of us want to be there," Brandon said quickly. "Come alone, Brandon," I said firmly. "You're the one who called me." Saturday afternoon, I showed up at the coffee shop 15 minutes early and got a table in the back corner where I could see the entire place. Brandon walked in right at 3 p.m., looking like he'd aged about 6 years in the past month. He sat down across from me, and I could see his hands shaking slightly as he tried to compose himself. "Tyler, thank you so much for meeting me," he said. "I know things got completely out of hand, but we're family. We can fix this situation." "How much do you owe the IRS?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. He swallowed hard. "About $52,000 between the back taxes and penalties." "And you can't pay it?" "Not all at once, no. But I'm working on a payment plan with them, and I found a new job doing construction work. It's steady money." "What about Mom and Dad?" Brandon's face fell even further. "They're looking at about $38,000. Dad's talking about taking early retirement and working part-time somewhere to make payments to the government." "And Jessica?" Brandon's expression became completely hopeless. "She's screwed. She's in really bad shape. She dropped out of grad school and owes about $43,000. She's working retail now, and she can't even afford a lawyer to negotiate with the IRS." I nodded thoughtfully. "So collectively, you all owe the government about $133,000 that you don't have. Tyler, please, there has to be something we can do, some kind of arrangement we can work out." I leaned back in my chair. "There is something you can do." His face lit up with hope for the first time since he'd sat down. "What?" "You can pay me back the $200,000 you owe me. If you do that, I'll file paperwork with the IRS converting the loans back to gifts, which eliminates your tax liability completely." "We don't have $200,000, he said quietly. "Then you don't have a solution to your problem." Brandon was quiet for a long moment, probably trying to figure out if there was any other option available to him. There wasn't, and we both knew it. "What if we started small?" he finally said, grasping at straws. "Like $600 a month from each of us until we pay you back completely?" I did the math in my head. At $600 a month per person, it would take you 11 years to pay me back without any interest. That's assuming none of you ever miss a payment. "We could do more as our situations improve," he said hopefully. "Brandon, let me ask you something. I said, leaning forward. When's the last time any of you paid me back money you borrowed? He couldn't answer because the answer was never. Not once in 4 years had any of them paid back a single dollar. Here's my final offer, I said after letting him sit with that uncomfortable silence. You all sign legal documents acknowledging the debt, real promissory notes with payment schedules and consequences for default. You make payments consistently for 8 months without missing a single one. Then, and only then, I'll consider helping with the IRS situation. What kind of payments are we talking about? Brandon asked nervously. You'll pay me $1,400 a month. Mom and Dad will pay $900. Jessica will pay $700. His face went completely white. That's impossible. We can't afford that on top of our regular living expenses. Then I guess you'll have to make some lifestyle changes, I said with a shrug. Tyler, come on, be reasonable here. I am being reasonable. I'm giving you a chance to fix this mess you created. Take it or leave it. Brandon sat there for several minutes, probably trying to figure out if there was any other option. There wasn't, and deep down he knew it. What happens if we can't make a payment? He asked quietly. Then the deal is off permanently, and you're on your own with the IRS. This is impossible, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Brandon, you drove 45 minutes here to beg me for help. Don't pretend you have other options. He nodded slowly, defeat written all over his face. I'll talk to the others and see what they say. You have until Monday to decide, I told him firmly. I left him sitting there at that coffee shop table and drove home to Christina and Max. I found them in the backyard, Christina throwing a tennis ball while Max bounded around like the happy goofball he is, completely oblivious to human drama and just enjoying life. How did it go? Christina asked when she saw me. They're going to take the deal, I said confidently. How do you know? Because they don't have a choice. Monday morning came, and Brandon called to accept the terms exactly as I'd expected. Peter drew up all the legal documents, and by Wednesday, all 3 of them had signed promissory notes officially acknowledging their debt to me. The first payments were due the following Friday. Brandon managed to scrape together his $1,400, probably by selling something or borrowing from friends. My parents came up with their $900, though I suspected they'd had to dip into what little savings they had left. Jessica could only manage $500 and begged for an extension on the remaining $200. The deal was $700, Jessica, I reminded her. I know, but I just started this new job and training doesn't pay much, she pleaded. I'll have the rest next week, I promise. The deal was 8 months without missing a payment, I said calmly. You missed part of your first payment. Tyler, please don't do this over $200, she begged. I'm not doing anything. You're the one who couldn't follow simple instructions. I canceled the deal immediately. Within 24 hours, Peter had notified the IRS that I was no longer willing to convert the loans to gifts, which meant my family was back on the hook for the full tax liability. They'd had their chance to make things right, and they'd blown it over $200. The begging really started in earnest then. Phone calls, texts, emails, even a handwritten letter from my parents that was delivered by hand to my office. Jessica showed up at my house twice more. Once with my mom, both times crying and pleading with me to reconsider. But I was completely done with all of them. They'd had their opportunity to show they were serious about making things right, and they'd failed spectacularly. Jessica couldn't even come up with $200 for the first payment, which told me everything I needed to know about how seriously they were taking this arrangement. 8 months later, the consequences of their choices had fully played out. Brandon had lost his apartment and was living in his car, bouncing between friends' couches when he could find someone willing to let him crash. My parents had been forced to sell their house and move into a 1-bedroom rental apartment. Jessica had declared bankruptcy and moved back in with my parents, creating a cramped and miserable living situation for all of them. The government eventually got its money through wage garnishments and asset seizures. It took several years, but the IRS always gets paid in the end, one way or another. They're remarkably persistent when it comes to collecting what they're owed. As for me, life was better than it had ever been. Christina and I got engaged 4 months after that coffee shop meeting with Brandon. We had a beautiful wedding in November, a small ceremony with just close friends and the few relatives who had actually supported us through this whole ordeal. Max was our ring bearer and managed not to eat the rings, which honestly exceeded our expectations given his track record with food-related responsibilities. We didn't invite my family to the wedding. We didn't even tell them about it until after it was over. I posted a few photos on social media with the caption, "Surrounded by people who love us. This is what real family looks like." The silence from my biological family was deafening, but they'd learned their lesson about trying to shame me publicly. These days, Christina and I live in a beautiful house with a big backyard where Max can run around and dig holes to his heart's content. We take weekend trips without worrying about who's going to need money while we're gone. We plan for our own future instead of funding other people's poor decisions. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how things went down with my family. The answer is no, not even a little bit. You can't make people respect you, but you can definitely stop paying the price for their disrespect. My family taught me that blood doesn't automatically make you family, respect and loyalty do. And sometimes the best revenge is simply living well without the people who took you for granted.